Today in the Fresh Brew Run Club, I'm reviewing the Lakefront Trail in Chicago, Illinois. Welcome back to the Fresh Brew Run Club. So for today's video, I'm doing another run review. So I've done a few reviews of some of my favorite places to run in the Detroit area. So I decided to take it on the road and head to Chicago and run on one of my other favorite places to run, which is the Lakefront Trail in Chicago, which is an 18.5-mile path. Basically, that goes between the city of Chicago to the west and the Lake Michigan on the east side of the path. So I went out and ran it so that you don't have to, but hopefully you can, because it's a great place to run. So with my run reviews, I have a 50-point system where I go over various things that are important to me. Now, of course, there might be other things that you value in a good place to run, but this is what matters to me. So I'm going to give each category a ranking, and it is on a scale, so some categories are worth more points than others. So let's dive into it. So the first category is parking/access, and this is downtown Chicago. I don't think you can get more accessible than this location. Chicago has amazing mass transit. There's a million ways to get to the Lakefront Trail. And there's some parking lots too if you are driving a car, but honestly, there's so much public transit. You can take a Lyft, you can take an Uber. There's just plenty of ways to get to the actual trail. And the trail is so long that there's tons of places that you can just hop on the trail. You don't have to start in one specific place. So this category is a 3-point category, and I'm giving it 3 points total. So next category is crowdedness, which is basically just how crowded is the trail. So this is a 5-point category, fairly important to me. So I ran around 8 or 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning, and honestly, it wasn't that bad. There's a couple places where the path narrows a little bit, so you kind of got to dodge people. That's why I didn't give it all 5 points. I did give it 3 out of 5. I would imagine if you run later in the day, there's going to be a lot of people, especially like right around the downtown area or the beach area there. There's a lot of people just walking and riding bikes on one side, so you got to kind of dodge people. But for the most part, I think everyone is pretty mindful of their surroundings. But it can get a little bit crowded at a few specific points. So out of 5 points, I gave the crowdedness factor 3 for the Lakefront Trail. Next up is surface quality. So this is just how good is the path. And this is the most important category for me because I don't want to keep twisting my ankles. 13 points total. For this, I gave it 12. It's asphalt, so you don't have to worry too much about how hard of a surface it is. Much of the actual path has been recently repaved, so you got this fresh black top that's just like very easy on the joints, nice to run on, very smooth, no real problems there. There are some areas that are kind of close to the water where the path or the concrete is a little bit harder and in a little bit rougher shape. So you got to kind of watch where you're stepping in a few areas. And then there was one thing that I did notice that kind of prevented me from giving this a perfect 13 out of 13 was there's a lot of sand on certain parts of the path. And that's just because like the wind has blown a lot of sand off of the beach and onto the path. So if you don't really like running on sand, there's a few parts that you might want to avoid on this path, but not a huge deal. There are some like barriers on one side to kind of keep the sand from going over in the path, but there still is a decent amount of sand on the path for maybe a quarter-mile stretch right along the beach. So not too big of a deal, but it did prevent me from giving it a perfect score. So this is a 12 out of 13 as far as surface quality goes. Next up is shade. So really isn't a ton of shade for a majority of the path. It does depend on what time you run. However, there is enough tree cover in a few areas that I was able to give this 1 out of 2 points. So not a perfect score, but also there was shade, so I couldn't give it a 0. So a little bit of shade, not too bad. If you are looking for a very shaded, secluded path, probably want to avoid this, but there is enough trees in certain parts that you could kind of get by without running in direct sunlight the entire time. So next up are visuals. This is the second most important category for me. So this is a 12-point category. You can't get any better than these visuals. Honestly, I don't know how many views are going to be better than this. On one side, you have downtown Chicago, you have the city, the skyline, the people, just tons of stuff to look at. On the other side, you have Lake Michigan, which is just like, it's incredible. If you've never seen any of the Great Lakes, I think people will be pretty surprised. Like it looks like the ocean. You can't see to the other side of an inland lake, which is pretty cool. So there's boats out there. There's people on the beach. There's a lot of people that are walking up and down the path. So for me, I really like that because it kind of takes my mind off the fact that I'm running. You start to think about other things. Your mind is focused on something else besides the extreme pain that you're in as you're running. So huge fan of this. So this is a 12-point category. I give the Lakefront Trail a 12 as far as visuals. I'm really interested in architecture and urban planning. So this is like an awesome place to run. Just a ton of stuff to look at. 12 out of 12 for visuals. Next up is bathrooms. Not the most important category, just a 1-pointer, but it is a nice thing to have on a path. So throughout the 18.5-mile path, there are a few bathrooms scattered about. So, I would definitely say, yes, there are bathrooms. Not the most frequent. Some of them are porta potties. But if you are in a dire emergency, there are some options that you have there. So I'm going to give this 1 point out of 1 for bathrooms. Next up is pedestrian safety. So the cool thing about the path here is it's, for the most part, excluded from traffic. There's only a small handful of times where traffic actually crosses the path. And it's just so busy with people riding bikes and running and walking that the cars are pretty aware. So it's not too bad. So you're going to be pretty safe. Like, there are parts where you have to share the path with cyclists, but there are also a lot of the path, it's actually separate, which is kind of, it's really rare to see a path like this that it's cyclists and runners and walkers are actually separated, let alone being separated from traffic. So very safe place to run. So pedestrian safety, 10-point category. I'm going to give this 9 out of 10. Didn't give it a perfect score just because there are a few times where you cross traffic. And then there are times where like you kind of cross the bike path. So you got to watch out for bikes because people are going pretty fast on bikes. So 9 out of 10, great score for pedestrian safety. Next up is mile markers. This is a 1-point category. Again, I only give this 1 point because most people have phones or GPS watches or an Apple Watch to kind of keep track, but it is nice to know. I, to be honest, don't know where the mile markers start. I see them along the path. I don't know if you're supposed to start at the northernmost end or the southern end or at the beach or where it is, but they do exist, but you just obviously have to start in a very specific spot in order for them to really matter. So this is a 1-point category. I give it 1 point because they technically do exist, but to be honest, I don't exactly know where you're supposed to start for them to be particularly relevant, especially for where I was running. And then finally, the cost to run. There are some places where you have to pay a fee or you have to be a member or you have to have some sort of parks pass. In the case of the Lakefront Trail, you don't have to pay anything. You can just walk right up and jump on. So this is a 3-point category. I'm gonna give it 3 out of 3, completely free to use. It's an awesome thing to have in the middle of such a big city, to have this incredibly long path that is specifically designed for pedestrians and runners and cyclists in mind. That's very rare. So the cost to run, I'm giving this 3 points out of 3. So that is my review of the Lakefront Trail in Chicago, Illinois. Totaling all of this up, this is 45 out of 50. So a fantastic place to run, one of the higher scoring places. If I could give visuals more points, I absolutely would, but I'm not gonna like break my own system. But this is an awesome place to run. I love just how much is going on. You get to people watch, you get to see cool architecture, you get to see sailboats and seagulls and dogs. Like, there's just so much to look at. It's one of my favorite places in the world to run. I feel like I could run forever on this path because there's just so much going on. So the Lakefront Trail, 45 out of 50, one of my personal favorite places to run. Have you run on the Lakefront Trail? Let me know in the comments. If so, what do you think? Do you like it? Don't you like it? What could be improved? What's your favorite part of the Lakefront Trail? Anything you want to talk about in relation to one of my favorite places, leave a comment below. I'll have some new videos coming soon, so don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you soon.